Take a breath with me. Slow, steady, in and out. Now open your eyes, not to the world you know, but to a night long ago when the sky over the Caribbean trembled with fire. Imagine standing on an island where the earth itself seems restless, where the air is heavy with heat and secrets, where every tree, every cane stalk, every shadow carries the weight of centuries. This is not a tale of kings and palaces. It is a tale of chains and blood, of whispers in the dark that became shouts in the night. It is the story of the uprising that shook the Caribbean, the fire that turned slaves into soldiers and soldiers into founders of a new nation. Before the flames, there was silence. Saint-Domingue, the colony that would one day become Haiti, was the richest piece of land in the French Empire. Its sugar fed Europe, its coffee fueled mornings in Paris, its wealth dazzled kings. But beneath the glittering accounts of merchants lay a truth soaked in sweat and blood. 500,000 enslaved men, women, and children worked its fields, its mills, its kitchens. They cut cane from dawn until the stars returned, their backs bent, their bodies scarred by whips. They were property on paper, ghosts in ledgers, nameless labor for endless profit. Picture it. Ships arriving from Africa, their holds crammed with human cargo, the stench of sickness clinging to the wood, chains rattling as men stumble onto the docks, women clutching children who are torn from their arms, the air thick with salt, sweat, and fear. In France, they called Saint-Domingue the Pearl of the Antilles. But to those forced to build it, it was a living tomb. And yet, in that silence, something stirred. In the shadows of cane fields, songs from Africa whispered. Around fires at night, stories of ancestors were told. In the rhythm of drums, in the murmur of prayers, in the defiant glance of a woman who refused to bow, memory survived. They had been stripped of names, languages, and gods, but not of spirit. And spirit, when pressed too far, becomes fire. The storm broke in August 1791 at a place called Bois Cayman. Under the cover of night, hundreds gathered. Some say there was rain. Some say there was thunder. All agree there was blood, a ceremony, a pact, a vow whispered to spirits and shouted to the sky that the chains would break, that the masters would fall, that freedom would come. Duty Boukman, a towering figure, spoke with fire in his voice. Throw away the symbol of the god of the whites who thirst for our tears. He is said to have cried. Listen to the voice of liberty, which speaks in the hearts of all of us. And the people listened, and they swore. That night was not yet freedom, but it was a spark. Days later, the cane fields burned. Flames leapt into the sky, devouring plantations that had stood for generations. Mansions that once rang with music and laughter cracked in the heat, their walls falling to ash. Masters fled, overseers begged. The order of centuries crumbled in hours. The enslaved struck not only with machetes and hoes, but with memory, with rage, with the strength of every lash they had endured. Pause here. Imagine standing on a hill above Cap Francais, the colony's shining capital, and seeing the horizon glow red in every direction. Not with sunrise, but with fire. The city panics. Merchants rush to the docks. Soldiers scramble for arms. Families clutch children and pray. They had always feared revolt, but they had convinced themselves it would never come. Now the nightmare was real. Within a week, more than 1,000 plantations lay in ruins. Cane fields blackened. Sugar mills collapsed. The wealth of Europe, built on the backs of the enslaved, turned to smoke. And in that smoke rose something Europe had never imagined. An army of the enslaved, fighting not for kings, not for crowns, but for freedom. The French struck back with fury. Militias marched. Soldiers poured into the countryside. Cannons roared. They thought terror would crush rebellion, as it always had. They executed rebels publicly, displayed severed heads on pikes, burned bodies as warnings. But terror had lost its power. For every body broken, 10 more rose. For every head displayed, 10 more vowed vengeance. The weapon the masters had wielded for centuries shattered in their hands. The enslaved fought with the land itself. They hid in forests, struck from cane fields, vanished into mountains. They turned rivers into shields, swamps into traps. They fought not as scattered fugitives, but as an army. Among them, Leaders emerged: Jean-Francois, Biassou, and the mysterious figure who would one day eclipse them all, Toussaint Louverture. At first, he was a shadow, a horseman moving silently between camps, a healer, a strategist. He studied his enemies, learned their tactics, and turned them back against them. He was not the loudest voice, but he was the sharpest mind. And as battles raged, his presence grew. By the end of 1791, tens of thousands had joined the uprising. Half the colony was in flames. France itself trembled, for it was not only Saint-Domingue that burned. In Paris, revolutionaries shouted of liberty, equality, fraternity, while across the sea, those words took flesh in the bodies of black men and women rising in arms. The contradiction could not hold. If liberty was universal, then it must reach across the ocean. If equality was real, then it must apply to those in chains. France debated, argued, raged. Meanwhile, the rebels fought on, their only debate the next battle, the next fire, the next step toward freedom. The rebellion spread beyond plantations. Towns were attacked, roads blocked, trade halted. The island's economy collapsed. But to the enslaved, this was not loss. This was justice. Every mansion burned was a monument of pain undone. Every overseer slain was a whipped silence forever. And yet, the war was not just fire and blood. It was also whispers, songs, and prayers. In the dungeons beneath plantations, where chains still hung from stone walls, voices hummed melodies carried from Africa. In the cane fields, rebels paused to murmur blessings, to remember ancestors, to summon strength from gods who had not abandoned them. The revolution was fought with machetes, yes, but it was also fought with memory, with faith, with the unbreakable refusal to be erased. By 1792, the uprising was no longer rumor. It was no longer a spark. It was a fire that refused to die, a storm that spread from the mountains to the sea. The enslaved had become soldiers. The colony had become a battlefield. And Europe, watching from across the ocean, realized that something unthinkable had begun. This was not rebellion. This was revolution. The fires of 1791 had not gone out when a different thunder rolled across the ocean. In Paris, revolution devoured itself. The monarchy fell, the guillotine rose, and the cry of liberty, equality, fraternity spread through streets dripping with blood. That cry, meant for citizens of France, traveled like lightning, carried in letters, whispered on ships, shouted by radicals. And when it reached Saint-Domingue, it collided with a land already burning. For the planners, it was a nightmare made flesh. Imagine being a man who had spent his life counting profits in sugar and coffee, and hearing that in France, the very empire you depended on, men now spoke of equality as a right. You tell yourself it cannot possibly include Africans. You insist it cannot mean women and children who toil in your fields. And yet in the night, you hear those same words repeated by rebels with fire in their eyes. Liberty, equality, fraternity. The cane rustles, the drums answer, and you realize your fortune stands on sand. Saint-Domingue became a battlefield of ideologies. White planters clung to slavery with desperation. Free men of color, many wealthy, educated, and veterans of French wars, demanded rights long promised but never given. And beneath them all, the vast majority, the enslaved, now armed and emboldened, refused to return to silence. 3 wars bled into one, each side fueled by rage and fear, each convinced their vision must prevail. In this furnace, Toussaint Louverture rose higher. No longer a healer in shadows, no longer a horseman whispered of in camps. He stepped fully into command. He demanded discipline, punished looting, forbade cruelty against civilians. His army, once dismissed as mobs of slaves, became as organized as any in Europe. He studied the enemy, outmaneuvered columns, turned forests into fortresses. The French sent soldiers. Spain and Britain circled, ready to pounce. Spain, holding Santo Domingo to the east, offered arms and promises. Britain, hungry for sugar, dreamed of seizing the colony for its empire. Toussaint played them with precision, like a chess master using chaos as weapon. First, he aligned with Spain, swelling his ranks with their muskets and their gold. Then, when France, desperate to hold a colony, abolished slavery in 1794. He turned against the Spanish and embraced the Republic. In that moment, the enslaved of Saint-Domingue were, in law as well as in defiance, free. Pause here. Let that sink in. France, the empire that shipped millions in chains, declared abolition, not from mercy, not from sudden enlightenment, but because they could not survive without the very rebels they had once condemned. Freedom was not given. It was taken, forced into law by fire and steel. Toussaint turned this decree into power. His armies, once fighting for survival, now fought with legitimacy. They drove the Spanish east, crushed British forces who landed with banners flying, and reclaimed land drowned in cane and blood. The British, proud in their red coats, fell by the thousands, not just to bullets but to fever, to exhaustion, to an island that refused to be conquered. Their officers returned home broken, their soldiers buried in shallow graves. By 1798, Toussaint was more than a general. He was the ruler in all but name. He rebuilt plantations, not as slavery, but with wages and discipline, for he knew the island must survive not only war but peace. He reopened trade with Britain and the United States, filling ships not with chained bodies but with goods produced by free men. His vision stretched beyond survival. He dreamed a society where black men were not property but citizens, where the wealth of the land fed those who worked it, but shadows lingered. In Europe, the planters never ceased their whispers. Merchants cursed the loss of sugar. Kings feared the spread of revolt. And in France, a new master had risen. Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of ambition, a man who dreamed of empires spanning continents. To him, Saint-Domingue was not free. It was property. It was France's jewel, and he would take it back. In 1801, Toussaint marched into Santo Domingo, ending Spanish rule and uniting the island. He proclaimed a constitution that abolished slavery forever, declared himself governor for life, and swore that never again would man in Haiti wear chains. It was a declaration as bold as fire, that black men, once enslaved, could not only be free, but could rule themselves. Across the sea, Napoleon seethed. He gathered the largest fleet ever sent to the Americas, tens of thousands of soldiers led by his brother-in-law Charles Leclerc. Their orders were clear: crush Toussaint, restore slavery, reclaim the colony. The horizon darkened with sails. Cannons gleamed in the sun. Imagine standing on the shore of Cap Francais, watching wave after wave of ships arrive, each one carrying the promise of chains reborn. The battles that followed were apocalyptic. French troops stormed the beaches. Their drums thundered, their muskets cracked. But the land itself fought against them. Fields were burned, towns reduced to ash, rivers poisoned, bridges destroyed. Toussaint's men fought with cunning, ambushing columns, vanishing into forests, turning mountains into strongholds. And then came fever. Yellow fever, invisible and merciless, struck the French army. Soldiers who had survived muskets fell to sickness, their bodies rotting in camps, their screams echoing through the night. The army that Napoleon had boasted would restore glory collapsed in despair. Yet victory was poisoned with betrayal. Toussaint promised peace, agreed to negotiations. He was seized, shackled, dragged onto a ship. Bound once more, the man who had broken empires was carried across the sea, imprisoned in a frozen fortress in the Jura Mountains of France. There, cut off from his land, eaten by cold, he died in 1803. But before his capture, he warned, "In overthrowing me, you have only cut down the trunk of the tree of liberty. Its roots are deep and it will spring up again." And they did. Dessalines, Christophe Pétion, his lieutenants took command. They drove the French back, outlasting them with fire, with steel, with sheer will. In 1804, the impossible became truth. Haiti declared independence. The first free black republic in the world. The only successful slave revolt in history. The world shuddered. Across the Americas, enslaved people whispered the word Haiti like a prayer, like a promise. In plantations in Cuba, Jamaica, Brazil, whispers spread. If they could break their chains, why not us? To the masters, it was a nightmare, proof that their empires rested on fragile ground. To the enslaved, it was hope made flesh. But freedom carried a price. France demanded reparations. billions in today's wealth, a ransom for liberty. Haiti, surrounded, isolated, forced to choose between invasion and debt, agreed. The chains were gone, but a new shackle, invisible, economic, was fastened. Generations labored not for masters, but for creditors. The punishment for freedom was poverty. Pause here again. Think of the cruelty. The enslavers forced the enslaved to pay for the crime of breaking their own chains. History calls indemnity. The truth is extortion. And yet, Haiti endured. Better hunger and liberty, they said, than feasts in chains. The birth of Haiti in 1804 was more than a nation's beginning. It was a thunderclap that rolled across oceans, across continents, unsettling thrones and plantations alike. Imagine the sound, not of cannons, not of drums, but of silence broken. For centuries, the world had insisted that slavery was eternal, that the order of chains and whips was fixed as the stars. And suddenly, on a Caribbean island, that lie was shattered. The news traveled fast. Ships carried rumors. Merchants whispered it in markets. Diplomats muttered in courts. And everywhere, enslaved men and women caught fragments of the story, pieced together whispers into hope. They rose. They fought. They won. 3 simple truths that terrified masters and electrified the enslaved. In the plantations of Cuba, overseers heard drums beat louder at night. In Jamaica, colonial officials reported songs sung in fields, strange songs that carried the name Haiti. In Brazil, planters shuddered at the word palmares and now added another name to their nightmares, Port-au-Prince. For if freedom could bloom there, it could bloom anywhere. But the powers of the world did not celebrate. They recoiled. France, humiliated, vowed never forgive. The United States, a young republic built on liberty, looked at Haiti not with solidarity, but with fear. For to acknowledge Haiti was to acknowledge that enslaved people had the same right to freedom as white men. Presidents spoke cautiously. Traders conspired in silence. Southern planters raged. Recognition was delayed. Trade restricted. Isolation imposed. Haiti became a beacon and a pariah at once. A torch burning too brightly for empires to ignore, but too dangerous for them to embrace. And so, Haiti stood alone. Yet even in isolation, its presence was defiance. Every map that marked its name, every coin minted with its seal, was a reminder. The enslaved can rise. But let us return to the island itself, because the victory was not only external. It reshaped lives within. Children born in 1804 grew up not as property, but as citizens. Fields once soaked with forced labor were now worked by free hands. The very soil, scarred by chains, now bore crops watered with freedom's sweat. It was imperfect, it was burdened with debt, it was harassed by foreign powers, but it was theirs. Pause here. Think of what that meant. To be the child of someone who had once cut cane under a whip and walked the same fields without a master above you. To sleep not in a dungeon but in a home you could call your own. To look at the sea and know that ships carry goods, not bodies. For the first time in centuries, black men and women could claim the land they tilled. And yet, the shadow of the past lingered. France's indemnity bled the nation dry. Plantations were rebuilt under systems of forced contracts. Leaders divided, armies fractured, foreign powers circled like vultures. Haiti's struggle was not over. It had only changed form. But the symbolic power remained unshaken. Haiti was a mirror held up to the world. To the enslaved, it reflected possibility. To the enslavers, it reflected fear. Consider Brazil. In Bahia, where African traditions burn strong, whispers of Haiti mingle with prayers. In 1835, the male revolt erupted, led by African Muslims, inspired by both their faith and the example of the Caribbean. Though it was crushed, its fire came from the same source, the refusal to accept chains as destiny. In the United States, enslaved communities heard of Haiti through sailors, through traders, through fragments of letters. Some spoke of Toussaint as a prophet, a Moses who had parted seas of fire. Others clung to Haiti as proof that revolt was not madness, but a path to liberation. Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831. Denmark Vesey's planned uprising in 1822. Both carried echoes of Port-au-Prince. Even in Europe, Haiti's specter loomed. Abolitionists pointed to it as proof that freedom was possible. Planters, trembling, used as a warning. See what happens when the slaves rise. Haiti became both argument and threat, saint and devil, depending on who spoke its name. But beyond politics, beyond economics, Haiti forced the world to confront a deeper question. What is freedom worth? To the enslaved, it was worth everything: blood, fire, life itself. To the masters, it was worth nothing unless it was theirs alone. Here lies the heart of the story. The Haitian Revolution was not just a war of muskets and machetes. It was a war of meaning. It declared that liberty was not the privilege of one color, not the property of one class, not the gift of one empire. It was universal, or it was a lie, and that truth could not be contained. Even today, when you walk the streets of Cap-Haïtien or Port-au-Prince, the air carries that memory. The stones remember footsteps of men who rose from chains to command armies. The mountains remember fires lit to signal revolt. The earth itself remembers blood spilled not for kings, but for freedom. Close your eyes and listen. Hear the echo of drums that once summoned armies. Hear the whisper of Toussaint's words. The roots of liberty are deep. Hear the breath of a people who refuse to die in silence. Haiti was not perfect. No revolution is. It carried scars, contradictions, betrayals, but remains the singular proof in history that enslaved people against the greatest empires of their age could rise and win. And that truth, uncomfortable, dangerous, unstoppable, still burns. Legends grow in the cracks where history is silent. Haiti's revolution, though recorded in chronicles and treaties, also lives in stories whispered across centuries. These are not the polished accounts of diplomats, but the rough, trembling memories of those who carried its fire in their blood. Picture an old woman in a Haitian village, her eyes clouded with age, sitting before children gathered at her feet. Her voice is low but steady. She tells them not just of Toussaint, but of spirits who walk with the rebels. She speaks of ancestors who rose from the sea to shield their children, of drums that summoned not only men but gods. In her tale, the revolution is not just human, it is cosmic. The enslaved did not fight alone. The universe itself conspired for freedom. These stories reach far beyond Haiti. In the Americas, enslaved communities heard fragments of them carried by sailors. In Bahia, Brazil, whispers spoke of warriors who turned bullets into water, of leaders who could not be killed. In Cuba, tales said Haiti had been freed by the hand of God, and so God's justice was inevitable everywhere. In Jamaica, enslaved men and women sang songs that slipped Haiti's name into verses, masked under spirituals. For those who lived under chains, such legends were not mere fantasy. They were survival. They gave courage where whips carved fear. They transformed despair into defiance. Because if Haiti could rise, if the impossible had already happened, then the impossible might happen again. But legends also terrified the masters. Colonial newspapers printed exaggerated tales of savagery, painting the revolution as chaos, bloodlust, horror. They spoke of children slaughtered, of cities burned beyond recognition. They did not tell these tales to honor Haiti, but to frighten others into submission. Look, they said, this is what happens when slaves revolt. Fear became their weapon, their excuse to tighten chains, to build new dungeons, to double their whips. And yet, despite their attempts, the truth of Haiti could not be buried. The enslaved carried it forward in memory, in song, in silence. Mothers told their children stories of Toussaint as they braided their hair. Fathers carved secret marks on tools, symbols of freedom drawn from Haitian lore. Communities prayed in hidden groves, asking their gods to grant them the same courage. Haiti lived wherever hope lived, but the cost Haiti paid was immense. Independence came with chains of another kind, economic shackles forged by foreign powers. France demanded reparations for lost property, a grotesque phrase that meant both plantations and human lives. Haiti agreed, under threat of invasion, to pay an indemnity, so crushing it crippled the nation for generations. Ships came not with soldiers, but with bankers. The revolution had won freedom, but the empire struck back with debt. Pause here. Let that sink in. The enslaved won their liberty with blood, and then their children were forced to pay their former masters for the crime of existing free. A century of labor, drained not by whips but by contracts. The sugar that once enriched empires now barely sustained Haiti itself. This was the revenge of the powerful, Not chains of iron, but chains of economics. Still, Haiti endured. Poor, isolated, battered, but alive. The fact of its existence was resistance. Every year it survived, every flag it raised, every school it built was defiance written in time. And around the world, that endurance mattered. In the United States, abolitionists pointed to Haiti as proof that slavery was not eternal. Frederick Douglass himself spoke of Haiti as a symbol, declaring it the first of the Americas to proclaim freedom. In Latin America, revolutionaries like Simón Bolívar found refuge in Haiti, carrying its lessons into their own wars for independence. Haiti was not just a nation, it was a teacher, yet the shadows grew longer. By the late 19th century, Haiti was portrayed in Western media as backward, dangerous, cursed. The very powers that had strangled it economically now mocked it for poverty. They erased the context, blaming the victims for wounds they had inflicted. The world looked away, content to forget the truth. But history has a pulse, and no matter how deep you bury it, it beats. Walk through Haiti today and you still feel it. In the rhythm of drums at night, in murals painted on cracked walls, showing Descent with fire in his eyes, in the voices of poets who write of chains broken and futures still to be claimed. The revolution is not just past, it is present, living in memory and in defiance. And so, when we tell this story, we are not recounting ghosts. We are amplifying voices, voices that masters tried to silence, voices that empires tried to erase, voices that still matter because they remind us freedom is never given, it is taken, fought for, defended. Now, let me ask you, what do you feel when you hear this story? Not as a distant observer, not as a student memorizing dates, but as a human. Place yourself on that island, on that night in 1791, when the first fires of revolt lit the sky. Smell the smoke, hear the drums, feel the terror and the hope tangled together. Would you have stood in silence, or would you have picked up the blade? That question lingers, not only in Haiti, but in every society built on inequality. Because Haiti's lesson is not locked in the past. It is a mirror, and when you look into it, you see yourself. Haiti asks, what chains are you willing to break? The dawn of January 1st, 1804, marked the birth of Haiti, not as a colony, not as a possession, but as the first black republic in the world. That morning, Jean-Jacques Dessalines stood before his people and declared independence, his words carried by winds that seemed to echo across the Atlantic. The chains were broken, the empire defeated, a nation of the formerly enslaved now stood free. But freedom had a price, and the world made sure Haiti paid it in full. France, humiliated, demanded reparations to recognize Haiti's independence. Reparations for what? For the loss of its colony, its plantations, its enslaved people. The demand was obscene, but backed by warships and threats of invasion. Haiti, bloodied and exhausted from years of war, agreed. The sum, 150 million francs, was crippling. To pay it, Haiti borrowed from French banks, drowning itself in debt. The nation that had broken chains now found itself shackled by contracts. The United States, a nation that spoke of liberty, refused to recognize Haiti for decades, fearing the example it set. Southern planters trembled at the thought that their own enslaved might draw courage from Haiti's flame. Recognition came only when it could no longer be denied, and even then, grudgingly. Europe treated Haiti as an outcast. Its ships were barred, its goods taxed, its very existence treated as an inconvenience. The revolution that should have been celebrated as a triumph of human rights was instead punished as a threat to order. Haiti's freedom stood as a rebuke, and the world sought to make that rebuke costly. Inside Haiti, contradictions grew. The dream of equality clashed with the demands of survival. Leaders quarreled, regions fractured, power shifted from generals to politicians to dictators. The plantations remained, though without slavery. Peasants worked small plots, often in poverty, while elites clung to wealth. The ghost of empire lingered in the soil, in the debt, in the hunger that shadowed freedom. Yet Haiti endured. Against all odds, it endured. Its very survival was defiance, its continued existence a constant reminder to the world. We were enslaved and we broke free. Pause here. Think of that. A people stolen from Africa, chained, whipped, buried in dungeons, forced into fields, rose, fought, bled, and built a nation. No empire granted them freedom. They seized it with their own hands. And though the world punished them, though history books often silence them, the truth remains. Haiti stands. Haiti remembers. Haiti teaches. Now let us reflect on what this means today. Walk through the Caribbean and you see traces of Haiti everywhere. In the songs of reggae, in the stories of maroons, in the whispers of revolts across islands. Haiti lit a fire that has never gone out. In Brazil, in Cuba, in the United States, in Jamaica, enslaved people drew courage from its example. Even when rebellions were crushed, even when bodies fell, the memory of Haiti's victory kept hope alive. And beyond slavery, Haiti's lesson remains urgent. It tells us that power can be overturned, that even the mightiest empires are not invincible, that justice, though delayed, can be forced into existence. It is a story of blood, yes, but also of endurance, of will, of humanity refusing to die. Imagine standing on that island today, the air thick with humidity, the earth scarred with battles long past, the people carrying centuries of resilience. Imagine looking at the flag, stitched from defiance, and realizing this nation was born of the enslaved. Every stone, every mountain, every wave of the sea carries that truth. Now, bring that truth closer to yourself, to your own life. What chains still bind you? What powers tell you that you cannot rise? Haiti's revolution whispers across time. Yes, you can. Yes, it is possible. Yes, even the impossible can be broken. And here is the more we cannot escape. Silence is complicity. Forgetting is surrender. To ignore Haiti's story is to side with the masters who tried to bury it. To remember it is to honor those who rose in darkness, who bled for light, who gave us the clearest proof that freedom is not a gift but a fight. So let us not forget. Let us carry their voices forward. Let us break the silence that empires tried to seal. Because every time you say their names, Toussaint, Dessalines, Christophe, Saint-Hilaire, you strike a blow against erasure. Every time you tell this story, you undo the work of centuries of silence. Now I speak directly to you. If the story moved you, if it unsettled you, if it woke something in you, do not let it end here. Share it. Speak of it. Keep the memory alive. And if you want to hear more hidden truths, more erased histories, more voices rising from the dark, then stay with us. Subscribe for Hidden History. Subscribe because there are more silences to break, more dungeons to open, more forgotten revolts to remember. Haiti's fire still burns. And as long as we remember, as long as we speak, as long as we refuse silence, freedom survives.